shoved Cameron in the door there. It's perfect timing. If not, that's great. That's awesome. All right, you can turn your Bibles, if you would, to Matthew chapter 8. Matthew chapter 8. As I mentioned before, we are going to have a church family time here this morning. It will be after just a short challenge here. And then I can announce if people would like to not necessarily stay for the church family meeting, you're welcome to leave at that point. But anybody and everybody here is welcome to stay. And so just note that as well. And I realize that there's some people that have already communicated they wouldn't be able to be here for one reason or another. So we'll try to update them as well. Matthew chapter 8 here this morning. A simple passage of Scripture. But it's a very pertinent passage of Scripture. In fact, Zach's falling asleep at the wheel up there, huh? I know every now and then we do get interference from police scanners and stuff like that. I don't think that was that, but every now and then there's a frequency, I guess, that we use that sometimes happens. But all right, well, as they work at that, I'm going to go ahead and I'll try and speak a little louder. I know my voice is not very loud, and so it is helpful to have the sound system, but Matthew chapter 8 here, you can read Scripture. So Matthew 8, verses 23 through verse 27. You can follow along if you can't hear me, but Matthew chapter 8 there, verses 23 through verse 27. And it says this, it says, "And when he was entered into a ship, his disciples followed him, and behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea, insomuch that the ship was covered with the waves, but he was asleep. And his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we perish. And he saith unto them, Why are ye so fearful, O ye of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. But the men marveled, saying, What manner of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?" Let's open with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we're thankful for the opportunity to be able to look into your word here this morning. And I do pray that you would just be in our midst, that you challenge and encourage each one here. I pray, Lord, that your hand would be upon this time, that you would be able to protect us from any other distractions or anything, and may help us be focused on that which you want us to receive from this time. And I pray that you would just use the things that are said to bring honor and glory to yourself, to edify your people, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, do I need to turn this back on, back off? Try this. All right, check your ears here for a second. Is that on there? It's not very high.
Should be good.
Should be good. You all hear me? Good. If you can't hear me, go like this during the message or whatever. Just feel free. I see some people already doing that in the back there. All right, so can't hear me, feel free to do that. Well, this passage of Scripture here is actually really interesting. As I was going to mention before the sound system so rudely interrupted, I got a call this last week, and an individual placed a call because they were concerned about something, and I think had a valid concern about something. And I'm glad that they called me. After it's to be able to kind of talk through these things, what happened basically was there's some different things that took place in the last business meeting that we had, some miscommunications, some misconcepts, whatever. I think it's just something that needs to be clarified. Perhaps not, and that's fine too. But all that to say, so we're going to be kind of tackling that a little bit today. And this individual called me about that and was very concerned about that. And they rightfully approached me about that, and that's definitely a concern. And it was interesting because that day I had read my devotions up to the passage we're looking at here. I'd actually stopped the verse prior. I was down at the wilds, and so we're moving around doing all sorts of stuff, and I had just enough time to get to the verse prior to this. This is the last section I was going to read in my devotions. And so I got just prior to this passage of Scripture, he called me about that, and I was kind of pondering over, thinking through that. And then I read verses 23 to 27, and it's like the Word said, that's what this is. It's a storm. And so we're going to discuss that a little bit. I put some stuff on the devotional website. You can go up there and look at it later. But, I entitled this, The Storms of Life. Storms will come. Every single one of us will face storms. And I'm not just talking about physical storms. There's been a lot of physical storms I've been in over the years. When I looked at this picture that I put up there, I was actually on this isn't the picture, but it reminded me of being on Lake Erie with my dad when I was a teenager. And we went out there in a 17-foot glorified rowboat. It was basically like a rowboat with a motor attached and had like a bow over the front. Okay, that's basically the exact thing that it was. I think 17 foot, I want to say, which is not a very long boat, if you know boats. Anyway, so we were out on this, and then all of a sudden the storm came up, and there were like 4-foot waves, literally 4-foot waves. So we would go, as we're going through the 4-foot waves, we would actually like go down into a wave, and like we couldn't see anything but water in front of you, water behind you, and like a trough, which is your wave. That's all you could see. And I remember thinking, as I was going through that, I'm not making it out of this alive. I remember thinking that as I went through that. I'm not making it out of this alive. And then the next wave, I'd think the same thing. The next wave, I'd think the same. You understand what I'm saying? All right, so sometimes the storms of life come. And a lot of times, just to be honest, a lot of times they can be of our own making. Okay? I'm not trying to say that they can't be of our own making. And many times they have physical components to them, real people, real issues, real things that need to be dealt with. But there are ultimately elements that are just beyond our control. Elements beyond our control. And I think what we're dealing with kind of in the situation as we approach that time is one of those aspects. And also is actually even, I think, what the Lord's doing in our church, there's also some aspect of spiritual attack to what's going on too. And so we're gonna kind of talk through some different things. We're gonna deal through some different things. There's also another aspect in which it's a gifting difference. There's a clash of some different perspectives in the aspect of gifting. And so I'm not gonna be able to clarify all those things, but simply to say this: the storms of life come. If it's not this storm, it's another storm. If it's not a church storm, it's a personal storm. Storms of life come. Those are a fact of life. But look in this passage with me. I'm going to answer 2 questions and then we're going to move on. I don't want to spend a long time with this. The first question is this: who was leading in the situation where the storm arose? Look down the passage in verse 23. Verses 23 and following. Read the passage. If we need to read it again, we can. Who was leading in the situation where the storm arose? Somebody can raise their hand and tell me. Okay, or just tell me that one too. So who is leading? Jesus was leading. So, and I have to say to myself, isn't God big enough to take them around? So why did he take them through the storm? Okay? Now, again, this is not a philosophy of ministry. In fact, I actually know of a ministry in which they actually had a philosophy of taking people through storms and actually purposely creating storms to deal with issues that come up. Other than that, I was like, that's just plain wrong. There's enough storms in life that will come up regardless. When everybody's trying to do absolutely right, there will still be things that happen. Let's deal with those. Let's not create our own. I have no storm-making machine. But sometimes things take place in our life, and to recognize this is the first question, is who is leading in this? You have to determine that as you get into a storm, am I in this storm because God led me here, or am I in this storm because I led me here? Okay? So you have to make that determination first, because those are different storms of life. And those are different reactions, different things that need to take place, different things that need to happen. These storms were storms brought on because they were doing what God wanted them to do. So recognizing that first, the important thing, storm or no storm, is to follow God. The important thing, storm or no storm, is to follow God. Think about this for a second. When was Christ tempted? There he was tempted after 40 days of weariness and other things along those lines. Didn't it say in Matthew 4:1, I'm going to read it for us, it says, "Then Jesus was led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil." So Jesus is in God's will, doing what God wants him to do, and he gets tempted. So we can't look at that temptation and be like, well, that's clearly wrong. Temptation is wrong. No, temptation is temptation. All of us will face temptation. All of us will face storms as we go through life. Those are things that just will come. If you're not ready for them, that's a problem, but there are ways to get ready, as Scripture talks about. So where did God lead them? He led them into the ship. He led them into the storm. God knew what he was doing. What do you think Christ was trying to teach his disciples? By taking them through the storm. What do you think Christ was trying to teach his disciples? I know sometimes we talk a lot more on Sunday night, but if people want to interact, that's fine too. If you feel like you have an answer.
His power to overcome the storm.
Okay, his power to overcome the storm was clearly an aspect of this as he got up and he said, "Peace, be still." And the waves and the wind and everything just died down. It went away. Amen. God definitely can do that with the storm. What are other things? What are other things that he wanted to teach them? Do we have any, can I say it this way, as we look through this and ask questions, how many of you have a red letter edition? Okay, Jim, do you have a red letter edition, but you also have an input?
The trustee said, "O ye of little faith."
Okay.
So he wanted them to have more faith.
All right. Yeah, the only thing that we have that Christ said through this circumstance is, "Why are you so fearful, O ye of little faith?" That's the only thing that's said through this whole time period where all this is taking place. And what is very interesting, I find very interesting is this, is the disciples don't answer. Even Peter is speechless. Now maybe he tried to answer, okay, I'm not trying to, maybe he tried to answer, but nobody could hear him because of the waves and wind. Okay, maybe, sure. But I think if that had been the case, we probably had something recorded. Now can I take you back a second and say this? If Christ would have asked this same question on the peaceful shore, what would the disciples have answered? "Why are you so fearful, O ye of little faith?" What would the disciples have answered on the peaceful shore?
You're not fearful.
Right? Nobody's going to be fearful on a peaceful shore. You just won't be. When things of life are going just how you think they should go, there's no need, do not need tested. It says there in verse 26, "Why are you so fearful, O ye of little faith?" I believe, and I wrote this on, I'm reading this from the devotional website as I wrote some things down to read because I've tried to keep myself on track. I want to preach a full message on this, but I'm trying to keep it simple. So you can look at the devotional website later. Why did God do this? Honestly, I believe God wants to show men what's in their hearts. What does a storm do? Unfortunately, it peels back layers of self so you see who you really are. What does it do when you're tested? What does it do when somebody is continually making that noise around you time and time again as a kid and you're like, "Stop it." Did they make you get frustrated and angry? Some would argue, yes, they did. Can I say this? They just revealed that you are a frustrated and angry person. They just revealed that. That's all. Trials cannot make you something. They only reveal what already is there. Storms cannot make you do something. They only reveal what already is there. The storms of life reveal who we really are. They don't make us things. Okay, so I'm not going to read everything else. I was going to read a little bit. Simply conclude with some of these thoughts. God didn't lead them around the storm. He was big enough. He was big enough to do that. He led them through the storm to reveal what was in their own hearts. Are you going through a storm of life? Something that perhaps reveals holes in your view of God and practice of His Word. Maybe something that just brings questions rather than answers, saying, what do I do now? Perhaps God is trying to draw you back to a vibrant relationship with Him through His Word. Because doesn't God's Word say in Psalm 119, 105, Thy Word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path? Do you need a light and a lamp if you know what to do? How many of you reach for a light when the power is on? You reach for a flashlight when the power is on. You walk around your house. How many of you walk around your house with a flashlight while the power is on? You're like, that's just weird. Right? We don't do that here. That's the church down the road. But how many of you, when the power goes off, reach for a flashlight? Right? Okay. Kate reaches for a flashlight. Good job. Get an extra piece of candy for that. But seriously though, I'm just saying this is, until God shows us where we are, we're really not going to approach Him and ask Him for direction. Until we run against a storm, we don't realize that we have a lack of faith. Perhaps praying and asking God to help. And I ended the devotional journal with this: may God use the storms of life to reveal where we are at and ultimately draw us closer to Him. That's what the storms of life are for. And actually, as I was thinking over this, the Lord brought back to mind a particular prayer I prayed a little over a month ago. Jimmy and I were out pulling weeds before the yard sale in June. We're out there pulling weeds in the church garden because it just looked atrocious. And I was like, that's a horrible testimony. And of course he says, I'm bored. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to grab you and we're going to go pluck weeds. Okay. I was thankful. He helped out with that. We're pulling weeds. We didn't pull all the weeds because there were too many weeds to pull. Like, I didn't have the time to pull all the weeds, how they should have been pulled. And there are two ways you can pull weeds. You can pull weeds from the top. How many of you think that's going to work very well? And you can pull weeds by digging down the soil and getting the root. There's two ways to do it. And as I have this up there. Sorry, that was for you kids. That's a weed. Okay, that goes along with what I'm talking about. But I remember as I was taking time doing that, and I was doing a physical act. But as I was doing so, the Lord was laying different people in my heart, different situations to pray for. So I was praying for those. I'm not trying to sound holier than thou, but that's what I was doing during that time. I was like, you know what? I can use my physical hands, and I can be praying, and that's what I was doing. And I remember I came to a point as I was doing that where the Lord, I just felt like the Lord smote me and said this: why don't you pray that I would remove the weeds from people's hearts? How does that happen? Well, you can pluck it off the top, or the soil can be churned to remove the root. And that prayer came back as I thought about this passage, as I thought about this situation. I believe that's exactly what the Lord has done to reveal what's in men's hearts. So let it show you what's in your heart. Don't run from that. Run to Jesus and say, that's in my heart. As you respond to that in particular. And just so you know, as I was praying for that particular thing, I didn't have the specific issues that we're going to talk about today in mind. I didn't have any of those in mind, praying about the root and removing that. I was truly praying for our church and that the Lord would do a work in our church to turn over the soil so that the roots can be exposed and they can be removed. How many of you have a garden? You have a garden? How many of you had a garden but now it's weeds? Okay, you can add in that too. Okay, say that's us. I can take a picture of our garden right now. We've not had time to do a whole lot. Charlie came over, he saw our garden. It's like nothing but weeds. In fact, he's going to come over and get some of the dandelions and some of the wildflowers that he wants or whatever. Maybe you already have. I don't know. I didn't look out there. Okay, whatever. All that to say, it doesn't take a whole lot to grow weeds, but it does take a whole lot of effort to grow something else. And I think God's doing a work in our church, doing a work in our hearts, And the issue that we're going to be talking about now is really an issue that is only revealing where we're at, where all of us are at. And it's something that all of us have to consider and grapple with. What is the lesson for you to learn? Not the lesson for the person with you next to you to learn. The lesson for you to learn before the Lord. What is the lesson I want to learn? All right, well, I'm going to move forward here. So if anybody that's not a part of our church family wants to leave, feel free to do so. I'll try not to use the sound system to destroy your ears again, but I am telling you that I would challenge you, if you're part of our church family, even if you're not a member, I would challenge you to stay. But if you're not a part of our church and you don't want to stay, that's perfectly appropriate as well. Member or not, you're welcome to stay, but I'm going to move forward with this, so feel free to leave if you'd like. That's fine. You guys discuss that. All right, so we have basically an issue that came up last business meeting. So this is a church business meeting now. The issue that came up last business meeting was there was two issues that came up. And we're going to talk about both of those here today. I'm going to start with the last one and work our way backwards. Okay? So those two issues. The first issue that came up that I discussed, was the issue of missions, mission support, different aspects of that in particular. And clearly there was a miscommunication. I was getting feedback that there was a miscommunication about what I was saying because of the other factor of what was talked about in the church business meeting. So I was getting it was poor timing, sure, I'll give it that, but it's actually one big issue, and so to deal with it separately would be very hard. So to be able to talk about all that, we'll deal with that issue. But then the second issue that was brought up, and obviously Katie and I left for this issue, is the issue of our compensation. Okay, so that was brought up as well. So these two issues were two main issues, basically brought up in the business meeting. For those that weren't here for that business meeting, I do believe it was recorded, so you can get a copy of that. But all that to say is those are the two issues that came up, and I'm dealing with the second one first. So the one that I was not in there for. So, and what we're going to do with this is, if there are any questions that you have that are not clarified by what I go through this morning, we're actually going to take a time tonight to take any of those questions. You can ask me specific questions, and I realize people are like, well, I don't want to ask questions in public. Please, I understand where people's hearts are at, I think, and I don't feel, if you want to ask a question, ask a question. If you have a concern, you should feel free to be able to ask a question. But I understand that can be really frustrating. So you maybe say, like, I don't speak in public, you know. It was funny, we were down at the Wilds. And they said, they did a session on fear. You know what the number one fear is? The number two fear was death. Number two fear was death. You know what number one fear is? Speaking in public. That's the number one fear. Now I do it all the time, okay, so I've kind of gotten over that. I will tell you that I had that fear at one point too. I remember, years and years and years ago, getting up in front of church to quote a verse. I knew exactly what I was supposed to say. I was going to quote a specific verse. I had memorized it for weeks. I got up and I could not remember what the verse was. I couldn't even remember the reference. I was like, I blanked. Okay, so I understand. And I will tell you, the last thing I ever thought I would do is stand up in front of people. It's the last thing I ever thought I would do. And it takes the grace of God every single time to do just that. But all that to say, I don't know where I'm going with that anyway. So, all right, so we're going to come back to that. That's another message, okay? So that's a side note. We'll get on that one. But the issue that we're talking about here first is we're going to be talking about, and this is an uncomfortable situation for me to talk about, but it's clear. Let me tell you the motivation first. Before I get into the issues, the motivation for bringing up these issues. What is the motivation? Is my motivation selfish? Now, don't answer out loud. You can think with me. Is my motivation selfish? And I think there are some people that got that perspective, and I'm sorry if I gave you that perspective. I'm sure that communication could happen on my side better. I have no doubts that I'll be able to look back and figure out some of those different things. Is my motivation selfish for bringing up both of these issues? My motivation selfish. My motivation, actually, I've not been able to bring it up for a number of years, and we'll get into that, because I believe my motivation would have been selfish. finally, it's like the word switched the light and made it like the motivation is no longer selfish, now it's selfless. That's the only clarity that I can finally have to move forward with this issue, move forward as God wanted me to. So the motivation coming down to it is actually for you, the church. That is my primary motivation in doing this. My secondary motivation in doing this, and you can say the order is flipped or not, is for my family, for my wife. Those are the two motivating factors for me. If it had not been for either one of those, I wouldn't say a thing. And I haven't for 7+ years. Okay, so we're going to get into this. Please understand I'm not mad. I'm not frustrated and angry, not any of those things. Honestly, I can honestly tell you, I'm just burdened for our church as a whole. And we're going to look through some of this stuff. So, I'm going to give you a timeline. Again, I'm going, and this is an uncomfortable thing for me to discuss, so I'm not like super comfortable about this, but it doesn't matter, because 1 Timothy 6 says, charge those that are rich in this world. You know, God's word does say, as a pastor, I'm supposed to be talking about some of these issues. So that's a whole other matter. Sometimes people get the perspective, well, if any pastor talks about money, clearly he's filthy lucre, and so therefore he's after filthy lucre, and so therefore whatever. Okay, there may be pastors that do that, okay, but understand that's not my heart. I think you'll see that as we go through this. My wife and I came to Grace July 7th, 2010. I love to go back through this and just remembering all that God has done through this time period. We had an initial budget of expenses only, which was $900 expenses and $600 for housing. That was our initial budget for over 6 months. And I didn't know, I'd never been a pastor before, so I had no idea how this works. I was like, I don't know how this works. I mean, we need money to survive, but that's pretty much it. So I submitted I did the best I could to submit an expenses-only budget, and we talked through that or whatever. And so that's what we did for the first 6 months. I will say this, it's kind of funny. Ken is not here with us, but Ken made a mistake in the second month. And instead of $900 and $600, he actually gave us $2,100, which the math was this. It was $1,500, which he thought was what our salary was, and then $600 housing. Okay? So he did that mistake. I had to go back to him and say, hey, that's actually wrong. It's $1,500 total, not $1,500 and $600. Okay? So I went back to him. For the rest of that time, we got under the $1,500 just so that we could give all the money back to church. In early 2011, the church recognized that need. The church then set my salary, our salary, at what I thought was $36,000. Okay, I wasn't in the business meeting when you guys discussed it, so Ken started giving me money, and so I was like, okay, sure, whatever. You know, I guess that's what the church decided. And I actually sat in a business meeting where they read the minutes. And the minutes, I did the math quickly. I love doing math, okay? I did the math quickly, and I said, Ken's giving us too much. Now, he had been giving us too much for about 6 months. And there was also back pay in that as well. So what I ended up doing is I had to go to Ken and say, hey, according to the business minutes that I heard read, I wasn't in there when you guys decided this. According to that, you actually should be paying us $34,500 as salary, not the $36,000 you're paying us. So for 2 months out of that year, we had no pay from church. So we can make that up. Only recently, in October, November, there's a lot of different things I would love to go through again. This is I'm trying to give everything. And in some respects, it's kind of uncomfortable, but I'm trying to help everybody understand, because clearly there's not an understanding of some of these things. Because I personally believe that every single one of you loves us. That's my take. Okay? So I don't think that you're purposely trying to make us struggle. Right? I don't have that thought. of anybody here. So I brought up our financial situation with deacons before the year's end in this past year. Now, I will tell you, I did not give them as much detail as you're going to receive here. We tried to talk about some different things. I didn't get a whole lot. I wasn't able to say a whole lot. We discussed different things. There was other topics that came up. And let me just say this on the sideline of this. I appreciate every single one of the deacons. Every single one of the deacons has a little bit different gifting, spiritual gifting, than I do. I believe every single one of them has the gift of prophecy. And I will tell you, as we go through this, some of my bringing this up, I believe, was a result of some things that God said through them in deacons' meetings and reasons why I'm continuing to pursue it. Okay, so there's a lot of things there, and you can ask that question tonight, and I'll give you all the details. But I personally appreciate every single one of the deacons, the ways in which they've ministered and other things like that. And I understand that they're very busy in all that they do, and sometimes they're not able to focus on some different things that we talk about in meetings, and we're working through those details. But all that to say, I did present, and I actually have up here, this right here is for everybody to take information. If you want any information, I have what I submitted to the deacons here. I made basically a 2017, now this is the end, this is 11/28. I have an email where I sent this to the deacons, we discussed it, etc. I sent this to them. I don't think they wanted to read it because they didn't want to see my financial information. They felt bad about the fact that I would be open and honest and transparent about it. They said, we know you're not, I remember multiple people saying in that meeting, we know you do really well with money, and you try to save where you can, all that kind of stuff. I think somebody used the fact that we don't have spinner wheels on our cars and other things like that. We know you're not whatever. And so I was like, okay, we worked through all that. So I presented this to them. And I think there was just some lack of clarity in maybe some of the things I said. Obviously, it was uncomfortable for me to bring it up, period. But it was a lack of clarity in some of the things that were said. And so, but I did submit this to the deacons at the end of the year. And we'll come back to this. All this is here. This is our financial information for 2017. You can look up the line items and everything. And please don't, if you come up and get that, I'm not going to be like, oh, they're really trying to find out. I want you to know. Because I think this is something that all of us can grow through. I want you to know. So we brought up financial situation, deacons, etc. before the year's end in November. It didn't come up in a couple different business meetings, etc. I was like, okay, well, whatever. I can honestly say, personally, I was a little frustrated and hurt by that. But, it was what it was, and I understand that they're for me, each one of them, and so I had to kind of wrestle through that a little bit, work through that personally. But so I brought that up. Then, now I'm going to go through the intervening time here, but I did bring up the financial situation again to elders on 4/7, which is our first business meeting, our first elders meeting after the elders were actually instituted. And I'm going to just kind of clarify here through this is the timeline of events. There's some thought, and I want to just state this out there, that perhaps I instituted elders so that I could get a raise. So I'll put it out there if nobody else will. There's some thought, I guess, out there about that, maybe misconception, maybe just a frustration that it might be the case. And so those are the kind of questions you just have to ask if you want to know. But the timeline of events is, as you've already seen, I've already talked to the deacons about different things. I remember in a January business meeting, we were sitting there, and the deacons had actually called me in for some specific issues and different things that they had seen. I was glad that they felt like they could come and we could talk about some different things. And they brought up specific aspects. There's multiple things we discussed in that meeting. We have notes for that meeting. But I remember one of the things that we brought up, and this is, trying to be careful, there was a church issue that brought up. I'm just going to say it that way. There was a church issue that was brought up, and Kyle, I think, was the one that actually said this, and maybe it's not word for word, so maybe Kyle will correct me later, but he actually said, is this something that we should be approaching you about deacons, or is this something that really elders should be doing? Something to that effect. And I don't remember the exact word for word, but he basically brought up, that in particular, and I did feel the freedom at that time to say, yes, I think you're right. I think that's probably more of, that's not exactly in the realm of the deacons to be able to deal with this issue. Okay, so that kind of started, that process then started. I remember just a couple weeks later, in my devotions going through elders, seeing that in a passage, and it was like the Lord kind of used some of the different things that were said and done, and how they were done, and just kind of opened up to this like, okay, so we need elders. Seeing the biblical need for it, obviously presenting multiple messages about elders. And I took that as an opportunity from the Lord. I didn't know what to do with elders because I had no preconception at all. So I tried my best to study through different portions of God's Word, arrived at what I explained to the church, and then having done that, then moved forward with it. And the thought occurred to me as I was moving forward with it. Late in the process, I thought, hey, we should look in the church constitution. I started doing things with messages and other things. I was like, what does the church constitution say about elders? Because they used to have elders. So I went back to the church constitution. Reading through the church constitution, I read different portions, I think, in some of those different messages. And reading that, I thought it was interesting that the church constitution has it set up as elders set the remuneration for the pastor, something to that effect. I don't have it in front of me here, but I can get you a copy later if you want to read that. And I just thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. Not that was my motivation, not that was my thought. It's interesting that that's what the church constitution says. I've never thought about that. So, obviously, elders then being instituted, we moved forward with that. We had a 3.5-hour meeting that first Saturday. I remember multiple times, we talked through so many different things. It was so awesome to see some of the things we talked about. I was excited. I kept telling them, I said, I realized I want to keep these meetings short. Do you guys want to stop or whatever? Do you want to, and they just like, keep going, whatever. Some let them stand up, and we're just keep moving. At the very end of that, I finally brought up our financial situation. I was willing to put it off if we needed to, but at the very end of that, I finally brought it up. I just simply showed them the sheet there. We talked about it for about 3, 4, 5 minutes, and that was it. There wasn't a whole lot of discussion. They had some different questions. We discussed things, but that was pretty much it. And I think it frustrated all 3 of them. So fast forward, so I brought the financial situation up to the elders. The elders are obviously concerned about it. They're working through different things, etc. This is something else that was just kind of interesting. This is a side note thing. Does anybody know what event with a missionary happened at the end of 2017? Okay. Ken Junelove, Ken Love passed away. And if you remember, he had sent a letter basically saying, continue to support my wife because we're not so secure, we don't have all this kind of stuff, etc. She's not able to make it. So we've discussed through that as a church, and we'll continue to do so. It was an interesting timing because for me, I continue to let this thing go. I continue to let it go. And God kept bringing it back up and kept bringing things back up and kept bringing things back up. Another thing that the deacons said in the January meeting, this is going to be part of this discussion, is they brought up, one of the things that they talked about was something in particular that I was doing with an individual that they had concerns about, and they were right to voice those concerns. And the concerns they voiced then gave me a clarity of thought to turn around and look at all sorts of situations. Because the kind of individual I am, I do the same thing with everybody. I don't play favorites. I do the same thing with everyone. I'm just who I am, wherever I am. Now, I'm not saying I'm not perfect. You all know that. But it gave me a clarity of thought to continue to pursue because of wanting other people to grow. I remember around that time as well, I had different good works messages, and the Lord really challenged me about the good work of even allowing people to fail and bringing up things and whatever, because you can't baby people to perfection. You have to allow them to see their need to be able to move forward. And there's a lot of stuff there I wish I could talk about. But there's a lot of more timing things that I could probably get into as well. But all that to say, there was this continual process that was taking place. And just to be clear as well, this is a question that was brought up. There has been no raise. If you want to consider January 2011 a raise, I believe it was couched as this is setting the salary because there was back pay given. This is what should have been going on. But if you want to consider that a raise, consider it a raise. That's the last time I got a raise in 2011. Okay, nothing's happened since then. All right, so now we're going into, and this is uncomfortable. I don't enjoy this, other than the fact that I think all of us as church members can grow through this. Pastors' numbers. There's a lot of numbers floating out there, and so I broke these numbers down. I don't know if you can read that next to there, but it says base salary is a fixed amount of money paid to an employee by an employer in return for work performed. Base salary does not include benefits, bonuses, or any other potential compensation from an employer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I'm not. So if you want to go on the business dictionary definition of salary, what we make from the church as a salary is $34,500 a year. That's what we make as a salary. Church provides health care to the tune of about $4,500, a little bit more than that. And that's why if you got one of these, as I did, that it says in here $39,000, $49,000 for those members that got this list, and you're like, well, what are those numbers? What is it talking about? So that we're all on the same page. Every single time we go through the business meeting, you're like, why are these shielded numbers? Every single time we go through the business meeting, we have these exact numbers listed. Every single time. You have seen these numbers. I haven't done the calculations, but 4 times a year for 6 years, 24 times. 24, 28 times for those of you who have been here the whole time. You've seen it 28 times. So this isn't something new. You can do the math. It's right here. This is a quarter, so multiply it by times 4, okay? So I'm not trying to be, it's there. The information is there. Sometimes people are like, well, I just don't know the information. And can I carefully say, if you don't know the information, it's because you didn't want to. Proverbs 1:5 says, a wise man will hear and will increase in learning. A man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels. You'll find it out. If you want to know something, you will find it out. If you don't want to know something, you won't find it out. Just that simple. So, going on further, I did a little bit of this. Now, honestly, I can't do a whole lot of this because it starts to make me frustrated. So, I'm not gonna. You wrestle back and forth. God's pulled me off the cliff. I don't know how many times, but here is our salary number. If just I work 40 hours a week. Now, I don't know how many of you think I only work 40 hours a week, but if you follow me for half of those, you'll realize I work more like 80 hours a week. In fact, literally everything we do for church everything we do from morning to evening is church related, if not specifically for church. So if I'm working 40 hours a week, my hourly pay is $16.59 before tax. If it's just me working 60 hours a week, which is clearly more realistic, but I would go further, it's $11 an hour. If you want to say I work overtime, so it's $8.29 an hour. If you want to say 100 hours because you're including Katie and both of us are working 50 hours a week, $6.63. If you want to include Katie, I would say this is probably the most realistic right here. At least 120 hours that we invest every single week in the church. Hourly pay, $5.53. If you want to go further to 160, you say, well, they clearly are doing a good job or whatever. We're earning $4.15 an hour. Okay, so we're not here for the money. If it's not clear yet, Lord willing, it will become clear. We're not here for the money. If we worked minimum wage, underneath there, if we worked minimum wage, went all the way across, minimum wage being $7.25 in Pennsylvania. If we put in the same amount of hours we work at the church, minimum wage, $7.25. You can follow it across, 40 hours, 60 hours, 80 hours, 100 hours, 120, 160. Okay? So I'm just breaking down the math because maybe it's because I look at these things and I'm like, how is it not blissfully clear? Like, how is it not really clear? But of course, I look at it through my lens and I just see that stuff. Okay, so I'm trying to be maybe overly, just so you know, that actually is right here. So a little sheet, if you want to take it, you can check the math later or whatever. The next one, down lower, number below, includes every remuneration minus gifts. So everything, including Katie's piano teaching, minus gifts. This is what we bring in a year. Everything, including Katie's piano teaching, minus gifts. That's what we bring in a year. This is what we lose every year we're here. So every year we've been here, we're putting out $4,000. And you say, well, where in the world, how in the world could you be here for that long? Love gifts? I'm going to bring this up carefully. I think it finally dawned on me that church doesn't understand. Please forgive me for saying it like this. I think it finally dawned on me that church doesn't understand when you all gave us a lovely, and please, it's an awesome, when you gave us a trip of $1,500, Katie and I both looked at each other and said, we need that money for groceries. I'm not trying to be, I'm just trying to tell you the reality, that's all. So it kind of comes back to this, and I kind of looked at this question because I really don't know. How did the church initially set our salary? Here's the two previous pastors in Grace Bible Church. Kevin from 2003 to 2006, housing and salary. So salary is, I consider salary housing and all the extra money. Okay, so that's 34,500 number. Housing salary is 42,000 each one of those years. Andrew, his salary was 36,000 from 2007 to 2009. If you do inflation on the 42,000, in 2003, and you do 3% inflation a year, 61,000 is the high. 57,000 would be 2006, if you're starting in 2006. This may be more realistic, 2% a year. 55,000 if you're going to start from 2003. 52,000 if you start from 2006. If you do 1% a year, you're looking at 48,000 to 47,000 for the 2003 to 2006 range. Now, I could use these numbers, you could run these numbers again with this number as well, okay? You can sit there and run all this if you'd like. Can I bring this up though? And this is actually what's really, really sad. Now, I want you to think about this, and I want you all to pray through this. Pastor Andrew was here for a year and a half, almost 2 years, I believe. Okay, I can go back and look at that. At $36,000 a year, he had 2 or 3 kids. They had a mortgage somewhere else, and they were renting here. You all know the cost of housing, and a mortgage is not cheap. He had to work outside jobs, and it was a real rub for people in the church. I cannot tell you how many times that was communicated to me coming into the situation. That people were very frustrated they had to work outside jobs. I remember that being communicated to me early on, and I took note that I heard it from many different sources. So I made the decision, I decided I shouldn't work outside the church even though I'm willing to. Because I felt like it would be bad for the church. Further, while Katie could work outside the church, I believed it would hurt the church. In fact, this is the motivating situation. This is why the elders actually moved forward ahead of their schedule of mentioning something, instead of mentioning it next business meeting and voting on it at the beginning of the year, because I told them we would literally not last that long. We'd have to go into debt to stay here in just a couple months. Katie's already started to take outside work, cleaning and doing other things. I actually asked the elders in that meeting if I could start working 1 day a week. And they didn't want me to do that. Instead, they wanted to approach the church about the issue. So we were basically stuck, and it's not for retirement, this isn't for adoption, it's not for cruises, it's for food and necessities. Can I just tell you this month, summer is a harder time for us because Katie's not teaching piano. Can I just tell you this month, in our checking account, I have $176 left for 2.5 weeks. Past that point, we're going to be using savings, and we have seen, and this is not, I don't want to be derogatory in this, I have seen for 6 or 7 years God provide in miraculous ways. And it's been awesome. You said, well, why are you mentioning it now? Why don't you just continue to trust God? Because I've gotten to the point where actually I realize that's wrong for you as a church. For you not to grow up. That's actually wrong for you as a church. It won't let you grow up. That's the only reason that I've gotten to the perspective that I've gotten to say, you know, this is not about me anymore. This is about the church. The church can't grow if we don't tell them. I even thought, you know, I guess if this doesn't change, I guess Katie and I just have to leave because there's nothing else we can do. I don't think it's God's will for us to go into debt to stay here to minister. It's kind of the drawing line. That's the line for me. I had considered, and I'll just tell you this, I had considered selling our house because we got our house at a foreclosure rate and there's equity in our house. I had considered and trying to work through selling our house, and probably everybody'd scratch their head, why did they sell their house? So they could stay in ministry here. I really don't know what else to do. Last month, Katie and I blew through $1,800 of love gifts, mostly outside of our church. Last month. Now there was some things that don't normally occur in that, but a lot of those expenses are actually normal. And again, Katie's not teaching, there's a little less income. So it's kind of like all year long we're trying to do the best we possibly can so we can save for the summer and hopefully make it through the summer. Every year is the same cycle, over and over and over again. Let me go through some other numbers here just to clarify. Pastors in our immediate area, this is right around our area, within miles of our church, a senior pastor making $70,000 equivalent. His salary only, not including houses and utility, is $42,000. That's a salary only, not including houses and utility, retirement, education fund, and so on, which is about the equivalent of $70,000. Okay? Now I'm not saying you said, well, that's outrageous. Just you wait. Senior pastor around our area, again, this pastor actually has houses included, other things included. The amount that he actually would get, including housing, including taxes being paid by the church, is about around $48,000 to $50,000 a year. But he's had no raise for 4 years, so if you include 3% inflation, he actually should be making $53,000. To me, I look at that and I'm like, man, that's sufficient. I mean, whatever. There's a youth pastor, assistant pastor, not far away, that worked a secular job, went into ministry, was paid $36,000 salary, so that's $1,500 a year more than we're being paid. He had health care paid for. He had to leave the ministry to go back and work a secular job due to burning through all their personal savings. He calculated up and figured, he told me that they need about $50,000 a year just to make ends meet. This is public information. You can go on the internet. Anybody can go on the internet and find some of this stuff. One of the pastors that I reached out to sent me back this link, and he said, I'm not going to tell you, I don't feel comfortable telling you, but you can go to this link. So I'm just assuming that this is around what he's making. I'm just assuming that, but he gave me this link. And it says here, I'm going to have to read it, it says, how much does a pastor make in York, PA? Now, York, PA, if you do any work, York, PA is actually 93% of the United States average. It actually costs a little less to live in York, PA. In New Freedom, PA, it's 1.12, so 112% the national average. So we're not even talking apples to apples here, it's actually under. Okay? The median annual pastor salary in York, PA is $91,639. Now to me, I look at that and I'm like, that's just outrageous. Okay? I'll say it if nobody else will. I look at that and I say that's outrageous. But you know what I would do if church started paying me that salary? I would hire a second person so we could be more efficient. Out of my own personal salary, that's what I would do with that one. Obviously, there's a range there as well, and it says here, not including bonus, benefit information, others and factors that impact base pay. Okay? So we can disagree with these numbers, but those are the numbers. I'm not even saying, I'm not here posing like that's the number. Okay? I'm not posing that. I look at that and I say that's exorbitant. That's outrageous. And then I went even further. Do you know that missionaries, some of which we support, okay? Now please, I have masked who these individuals are, and not every single one of them we support. In Europe, one of the missionaries that I reached out to and received numbers from makes $73,700 a year in the equivalent of a U.S. equivalent, in the equivalent of a New Freedom equivalent. Okay? So what did I do with that number? Very simply, I did this. The country that they're in is 5% less expensive than the United States average. Okay, you can find this out online. New Freedom is 12% more expensive than our country's average. So I take those percentages and I work it out, and what does it come out to? In U.S., New Freedom dollars, $73,700. In Africa, a missionary, now $36,000 a year, because it's 266.71, the dollar goes 266 times farther than, or 2.66 times farther than it would here. Okay? You do that math, it comes out to $107,500 a year, and this does not include retirement, health care, and travel to the States. South America, $125,000 a year, U.S. New Freedom equivalent. Possibly includes, I know these individuals, obviously I know all of these. It might include as well resources for their church. Okay, so some of these might include that. But I know some of them, and I know they don't include that, so just take that for what it's worth. North America. Somebody very close to us, and I'm going to be very clear, this is not anybody from IPM, $79,800 a year within a few hours of us. I don't even know if that includes everything. I don't know if that includes healthcare, retirement. I don't know if that includes, I'm assuming it does. I'm just going to assume that. Okay, again, the cost of living index. You see here, you probably can't even see that, maybe back there, it's really small. You can go online, you can study all this stuff out. All the resources, we live in a world where there's so many resources available, they're all there. Just go Google this. Cost of living index. National, 100, Pennsylvania, 100, New Freedom, 112%. And it lists out the factors why that's the case. Housing being a significant one. And when Katie and I finally looked, we were wanting to buy a house, and we could not afford anything in New Freedom. Fixer-uppers, we couldn't afford any. I mean, you can argue whether we can afford the house we have now or not, but I felt very clear that the Lord had led in that decision, and that we had gotten it at such a great rate. I mean, we literally got it at what the bank needed to get in order for them not to foreclose on it. That's all we paid for our house. We have a good amount of equity in our house, and I'm thankful for that. I think it's the Lord's blessings. But we would not be able to afford it otherwise. And I know sometimes people look at our house and they're like, wow, they got a lot of money. Or they look at our car, Katie's CRV, that was given to us. We didn't buy that, that was given to us. My dad gave us that car. So I know people look at different things and go like, wow, they clearly must be doing well. You know, they're happy. You know, they're content. You know, you don't need money to be content and be happy. Okay, you don't. It would help to survive, but you don't need to be happy to be content. Okay, so that brings up then this, and I want to, and I feel like I haven't even looked at my notes, and my notes are definitely there to help. Going on further, just to, before we get into this real quick, we're almost done. We also, Katie and I we have this perspective that we try to save money everywhere. I appreciate, my wife has saved for us personally, easily $10,000 a year. I can say that because she's not here, she's worth her weight in gold. If I had the money, I'd buy her weight in diamonds. I don't even know which one's more. But the whole point being is, this is other things that we don't publicize this. We don't want people to know this, but we also try to absorb a lot of church costs. You know, the internet we're using right now is actually internet that we qualify for because we have poverty level income. And we decided to use it for church because church could save hundreds of dollars more than we could save. Wow. I could go on and on and on and on. We housed Levi and gave him food while he was here because we felt like that would be beneficial for the church. Now, Levi gave us substantial love gifts. Didn't completely cover all that, okay, understand that. But he gave us some substantial love gifts, which clearly helped out with that. So he wasn't trying to mooch off us. He felt as bad being in that situation as we did, but it came back to a discussion I had with the deacons where we talked about how they're uncomfortable for him to stay in the church. So I decided to listen to them instead of override them, and the burden fell on us. And I don't mind that. I really don't. We're here to be a benefit to Grace Bible Church every way we possibly can be. So regarding the missions questions, from the first thing that we talked about, where I brought up these 3 missions questions. I'm going to post them all up here. Perhaps you weren't in that. You can read through these. What is God's focus for us as we consider missions and reaching out? How would Acts 1:8 help us lay down some principles or goals? What is the balance between our own church and community and supporting missionaries around the world? When is the time that we should reevaluate a missionary support? And I'm not just thinking negative there. Can I bring this back up? Within a year and a half that we were here, I felt like the missionaries have been supported for 10, 15 years at the same rate, and there's never been any adjustment for them. And I pushed very hard, and we finally got through an increase, a 5% increase for all the missionaries. Now, I think we could continue to do things like that as the Lord bless. I want to see us continue to do that because I don't think people have that thought in mind. You know, they're on the field for 30 years. How does the dollar change over 30 years? Do you think there's any change? I know we have an idea that it's worth its weight in gold, but it's really not. Are there missionaries that we're supporting, though? And I don't mind asking this question. Are there missionaries that we're supporting that we shouldn't be supporting? You have to go both ways with this, and you have to clearly examine all the evidence. Now, I would love to, that's its own discussion in and of itself, but I brought this up, and I don't know if you remember at the business meeting, the one thing that I brought up, there's multiple that I bring up as I think about the missions and the money that we're putting out for missions, and I think it's awesome that we're able to do that. Okay, I really do. I think that's just absolutely awesome. But I brought up this, I said, when our church building is crumbling and we're supporting missions, that's not a positive thing, that's a negative. That's not a pat ourselves on the back and walk out and say, wow, we did a great job. No, one day we're going to come when we don't have a church building. The roof has needed to be replaced probably for a while. 2 years ago, we had some stuff fly off, and we opted to just fix the problem. And the roofer told me, he said, that roof is getting really close to the end of its age. Are we planning ahead for that? We're going to wait until we start seeing a leak in the auditorium. That's going to be a lot more costly than fixing it in advance. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm trying to think ahead on some of these things, and we're trying to get ahead on this, but it's going to mean that we look at everything and say, okay, what needs to go, what needs to stay, and how do we do that? Now let me just say this. my solution, I never really got to it. Katie rightly talked to me afterwards, and we had a discussion about how I didn't say some things. She knew I was thinking, but I didn't say it. And I tried to communicate things clearly, but I didn't have anybody coming up and asking me about what I had said. And what I see as a recurring pattern, if I can just carefully say this, what I see as a recurring pattern is people don't talk to the person that has the information, they talk to everybody else. If I say something and you're unsure, come talk to me. If the elders say something and you're unsure, go talk to them. If the deacons say something and you're unsure, go talk to them. If somebody in the pew next to you says something and you're unsure, go talk to them. This is a reoccurring pattern with the church, and we need to get that fixed. Okay, that's the message. Now we're going to go back to what I'm talking about here. What is faith promise? This is actually the solution I see. Now, I'm not saying this is the solution for our church, but I think this is a potential solution. And I would have to talk through it. This may create more questions than answers. So who are you going to come talk to when you have those questions? But just so you're clear, though, I put sheets out here for those that might have questions, and it has questions and answers about what that means. And I'm not going to take the time to go through because we don't have time to do this. And maybe tonight, if you want clarification, ask the question, what is faith promised? And we'll talk about it tonight. You can put in slips of paper in the box back there or whatever if you want something discussed, if you want something brought up. Maybe it's nothing we have discussed here tonight. Maybe it's something else. It'd be better if we could stay on topic and not go off on everything, but if you have a question, ask the question. That's actually part of the burden why I put this suggestion slip back there. I'm asking to hear from you. And what do I get? Silence, and then all of a sudden somebody raises this major big question, and I'm like, why didn't anybody come talk to me? Because I'm asking constantly for you to approach me if there's an issue, if there's a problem. Come talk to me personally. Do not talk to 15 other people about me. Come talk to me. Okay? So this is, I mean, you're not going to be able to get a result. If you actually want an answer to the question, you have to go to the person that has the answer. If you don't want an answer to the question, then don't go to the person that has the answer. If you want to just feel good about it, go to somebody else and talk to how, whatever. But that's not the point. That's not the perspective. And I don't think that that's the vast majority of everybody's heart here, but I think it's a lack of communication. I really don't think that that's people's heart, that people want to see Grace Bible Church fail. I don't think that's your heart. I wouldn't be here if I thought that was your heart. But the practice of that needs to come along with the understanding. So I see a lot of different things that need to be done. I could go on and on and on about things that I believe the Lord needs to, in our church, things that need to happen. And it means we have to make hard decisions. It means we have to look at things. It means we have to work together to find a resolve. But really the question is, do you want to work together and do you want to find a resolve, or you just want to stew? That really is the answer. That's the question that we're asking. Now, I realize that I may have missed all sorts of things. I'm looking through some notes. There's a lot of things we could talk about more. Just so you know, too, I got one of these. If you remember, you got one of these about putting it in there. I was like, should I even fill this thing out? You know, how? So you say yes. But I'm like, you know, if it comes down to a 50% vote, I'm 51. Now somebody approached me and said that they would be willing to fund what is being talked about personally, our salary increase for a year, if the church has a problem. Somebody approached me about that personally. But you know, I talked to them and we talked about it, and I said that's still not healthy for the church that's kicking the can down the road. We don't kick cans down the road, do we? They said, now where in the world is all this money coming from? Where can we do this? We can may talk about this a little more tonight as well, and perhaps this is one of the questions that we'll address, but Rick has told me about different things. I try to get out of the financial aspects of all that, okay? I don't know all that stuff. I try to get out of that stuff. Rick records coming in, Rodney is recording what's going out on spend, etc. We try to do those different things. I try to pull myself away from that. But Rick has talked about different aspects of general fund and giving and trends that he sees and other things like that. So you can talk and ask questions more about that if you want. But the whole point being is, that's the situation, I guess. And I look at it as, I want to see Grace Bible Church grow through this. It's some hard stuff we've talked about here this morning. It's not stuff that I just enjoy talking about because whatever. For 7 years, I've not talked about it. It's been maybe a greater problem in some of those years than others, depending on all sorts of factors, but so it's not like I'm rushing to talk about this thing, and sometimes people get this perspective that I'm just rushing to push things through. For 7 years, this has been an issue. This isn't an issue that started yesterday. I didn't do this, and maybe I shouldn't. But I think I might, only for the fact of reminding myself that who truly supports me? God supports me. You know, I came here on this, Matthew 6:33 says, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things should be added unto you." We had no assurance of anything when we moved out here. Nothing. I didn't know what church would do or not do. We had no financial conversations beforehand at all. And I was okay with that. I think the Lord had led to that point that he said, "This is what you need to do, just do it." So I was following what the Lord said to do. I did know that we had some money from just getting married, but that didn't take long for that to be depleted either. So, I mean, it's an issue that honestly I should have brought up a long time ago, and it's on me that I haven't. Because I feel like I've tried to absorb that rather than say it and allow people to grow up and say, you know what, I need to stand up and do what's right. I need to move forward. And the only other thing that I thought of myself is, and I'll close with this, I thought to myself, I said, well, you know, if for some reason this is not a motivation on how you're going to vote, I said, if for some reason the church doesn't do something, maybe it's at the point where Katie and I just need to leave. I don't want to leave. My perspective is this: if God's called me to this place, I'm going to stay here till the day I die. I'm not looking to upgrade churches. I'm not looking for, I have gotten offers from church after church from people saying, hey, why don't you come work for me? I said, no, this is where God wants me. You know what? It would have made a whole lot of financial sense for me to move because they offered me a lot more money. But I said, this is where God wants me. And until he says I move, I'm staying right here. Or until you say I move. That's fine too. So, I was going to say something about that. I don't know where that came from, but there was something I was making a point about it. But all that to say, I'm learning that I cannot absorb. I'm like, as we talk about the rock and the rock tumbler, I do my very, very best to pull in every rough edge I possibly can and be as smooth as I possibly can so I don't hurt anyone. And God said, no, that's not helping them. You got to say it like it is. Not in a derogatory, mean sense, but you have to say it like it is. So, I try to say it like it is. All right, let's close in worship.